Well, let me tell you how this is going to work tonight, because it's going to be a little bit different. As you notice, we have two stools up here, and we will have two world leaders speaking to us tonight. The host of all of these events will be President Vicente Fox. He will be bringing the different presidents and prime ministers. We will first have Prime Minister Chretien speak to us for a few minutes on whatever is on his heart. He gave a wonderful speech this morning at the University at TCU, and we know that it will be wonderful here also. Let me tell you just a little bit about him. I know that many of you had met him before. Many of you had already been reading up on him to come meet him. But without going back too many years, he's very young, but I'll just go to 1993. Jean Chretien was sworn in as Prime Minister of Canada. His most important achievement include reducing, listen to this, reducing an incredibly large national debt. We might need some advice on that, sir. I'm not sure, but a 42 billion deficit was eliminated. 5 consecutive budget surpluses were recorded. Some say it wasn't 5, that it was 10 years. He can maybe explain to us. 36 billion in debt was paid down, and taxes were cut by $100 billion over 5 years. I'd like to give him a hand just. One of the Chretien's main focuses in office was also preventing the separation of the province of Quebec, where he is from. He's been had an active social agenda, including a child tax benefit. He ratified the Kyoto Protocol. He worked for a global ban on landmines, did a wonderful work in that arena, and pushed for the establishment of an international criminal court. In December of 2003, Jean Chretien retired as Prime Minister, but has not stopped going around the world giving us his wisdom and advice. Would you join us up here, Prime Minister?
As we say in Spanish, merci beaucoup, Monsieur Hernandez. Madame Mayor, President Fox, ladies and gentlemen, I'm happy to be with you in Fort Worth. You know, because I have friends here, and if you say Dallas, they don't like it if they are from Fort Worth. I don't know why, but no, I'm happy. I was here the first time in 1971, made a speech somewhere, I don't remember where. I was Minister of Indian and Northern Affairs. You know, all the north of Canada was under my administration. And I said, you know, I'm very impressed by the size of the state of Texas. Very big. It's about 1/4 of the Northwest Territories. And as you know, I'm Francophone, and I became a great fan of a football team called the Cowboys. You know why? Because you had a very good coach with a French name. He was a Cajun, Tom Landry. It's too bad you don't have one like that today. And so I hope nobody would kill me, but I took some chances in life. Yes, Mr. Hernandez, you're absolutely right. You know, you saw what we managed to do. We reduced the deficit to 0. We paid the national debt. And you know what is the name of my party? I'm a liberal. I'm not a conservative, I'm a liberal. So everybody is confused when I'm traveling the world with this title. When you're in Europe, a liberal is a conservative. And when you're in the United States, apparently it's very bad. So I have to define what is a liberal in Canada. And I say, when the people on the right says of you, you're a left-winger. And when the people on the left says of you, you're a right-winger. You're a very good Canadian liberal. That means that we are fiscally responsible and socially preoccupied. And you're in favor of immigration. But I know I should not talk like that in United States, but I have a right to talk a bit about United States because not many people will understand or will believe me that my father spent the first 10 years of his life in Manchester, New Hampshire. Yeah, and he came back to Canada. After 10 years, it was enough, probably, I don't know, but no, but it is, so my connection with the United States have been good because my dad was associated with a little business in Manchester, New Hampshire, and twice a year we'll go to Manchester, New Hampshire, and sometimes we'll go with him. And I had the chance to go one day, twice, to go to see Ted Williams play baseball in Boston. And when, now I'm in good mood. Your President George W., I met him yesterday with President Fox. We were, for many years, the three amigos. We did not agree on everything all the time. That's another problem. But personally, we had very good relations. And, and we had some little problems. So I will tell about two. We had a softwood lumber problem. We were Canadian dollar was weak in those days, so it was tough to compete with the Canadian wood. So protectionist forces stopped some of the imports coming to the United States, and it was a problem for me because a lot of factories of making softwood lumber had to close down. And I used to say to the President, George, if I was to stop selling you oil, natural gas, and electricity, you will need a hell of a lot of softwood lumbers to heat your home. And as we had good time together because when times was a bit slow in the meetings, we'll talk football or baseball. And one day I told him this. I said, you Americans, you're very funny. I said, you hired a guy by the name of Hector Rodriguez. Do you know the name? The shortstop of the team, the baseball team here. And I said, you're paying $250 million for 10 years. $25 million a year to pick up the ball at the shortstop, throw it to the first base, hit it in the field 1 in 3 times, and once in a while over the fence. I said, George, you will have to be President of the United States 400 years to make the same amount of money. So for the people who claim that we're in politics to make money, you have the answer there. No, we always had good relation between Canada and United States. When I became Prime Minister, I was Prime Minister when we passed the law to have the NAFTA that became the North American Free Trade Agreement. And this has been fabulous for every one of us because we have increased the level of trade immensely. In Canada, we're trading something like $1.5 billion a day with America. And and it's very big with Mexico too, with the United States. So, of course, you have to adjust to the reality of that. Some areas paid a big price, losing jobs, but we replace them with other jobs. Transitions are always difficult, but we live in a global world today. It's amazing. We know each other, we talk to each other. President Fox and I, we're member of Interaction Council, where with 35 former leaders, we meet once a year and we discuss international problems. These things did not exist 50 years ago. For example, when I was Prime Minister of Canada, I met the President of China 18 times. And it was a big thing when Mr. Trudeau, I was a member of his cabinet, recognized China. We were the first to recognize China in the Western world. It was a revolution. After that, Nixon went to China and so on. So we don't live in the same world. And we should not be preoccupied by that. because the fact that there is more trade and more communication, that is creating wealth. You know, the Chinese are getting very rich, but they buy from us all sort of things. Of course, we buy perhaps too much from them, but we're not obliged. It's because they produce products that are cheaper, and we have to compete. But competition is what is the motor of a capitalist society. But a capitalist society sometimes make mistakes. As I say in my speeches, the problem with capitalism are the capitalists. No, it's a good system, but they don't know where to stop. And it was the crisis of 2008. The problem was the bankers. The amalgamation of all the banking system, where very often they were in conflict of interest and they got too greedy. We in Canada, and it's one of our great success when we were forming the government, when the banks wanted to do the same thing that they were doing in America and in England, Great Britain and in France, I said no. All the bankers were very unhappy with me. They were, but today, at that time, 1995, when we were facing that problem, of the 15 best capitalized banks in North America, one was Canadian. Today, of the 10 best capitalized banks in North America, 5 are Canadians. The presidents of the banks were all very unhappy with me. And when I see them today, I say to them, I'm very happy for you, Mr. President of the bank. People say of you that you're one of the best bankers in the world. Good for you. Of course, you don't tell them that it's because we stop you from jumping from the bridge that you look that good today. So, it's a balance between absolute freedom that you lose tracks of what you do, basically, and you create problems. But I'm an optimist. I think we'll get out of these difficulties. I was talking with your mayor, and we're commenting about that. When you're in public life, you solve a problem, and you have the impression that you create 2 new problems. But in the process, you're making progress. So tonight, I'm supposed to speak only a few minutes because my friend Fox and I will be sitting there answering your question. For me, in Canada, we have a system where the Prime Minister has to be in the House of Commons at least 3 times a week for an hour. And he has to take the question from all the members of Parliament. And it's a good system because you have to be aware of what's going on. Otherwise, you look pretty bad. And I had to do it as a minister for 20 years and another 10 years as Prime Minister. So that's the only thing I miss from politics. Question period. So President Fox and I will give you a question period. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
And let's give a hand to the man who brought democracy to Mexico after 71 years of one-party reign, President Vicente Fox.
First, let me tell you how honored we are to have here Prime Minister Chretien, a world leader who moved Canada to the vanguard. I would say today that they might have today the highest quality of life worldwide. It's a great nation and built by great leaders. So thank you, Jean, for being here. Thank you again, because we're flying tomorrow down south to Guanajuato, to San Cristobal, to the Fox Library, Fox Center, where he will perform as he did today. So this is great to have the possibility of working internationally and enjoying the wisdom of leaders like Jean Chretien. In relation to what's going on in Mexico, it's extremely, extremely sad, complicated. I spoke about that issue last time I was here with some of you. And the real thing is that at the very end, it's not our problem. It's a problem of being in between the huge consumer market of the North and the producing drug nations of the South. And we're just being used as a transit place to bring that drug to consumers here in the States. So we have to get out of that trap. And the sooner, the better. And we must start thinking laterally, creatively, with wisdom and innovation, because it's not easy to get out of that trap. It's extending worldwide, and the comments and the position of most world institutions is that we have not been able to meet a problem like this worldwide. United States has not been able to cut the demand for drugs. It keeps growing and growing. This nation has not been able to cut and take to jail every single user of drugs, which in this nation is prohibited, is penalized, which is not in Mexico. In Mexico, drug consumption is not penalized. It's penalized distributing and selling. And most of the countries in the world have the same situation. So there are many questions to answer. What happens with a cargo load of drugs that crosses the border? Why is not stopped right there at the border? What are the security and drug agencies of these nations doing about that? Those cargo loads are moved up north to everywhere in the States. The largest consumer market of drugs in the world is right here in this nation. A market worth over $50 billion a year. Questions like, how does that money come back to Mexico? After being sold, who collects, who launders, and who brings it back to Mexico to bribe, to corrupt Mexican authorities? The question is, where do these cartels get their guns and ammunition, their weapons? It's said that 90% of that is bought here in the black market of arms, ammunition, and weapons. So we're in a trap in Mexico, and we must get out of it. But we need the comprehension, we need lateral and intelligent thinking to get out of that trap. And we're working hard, because the price we're paying, I don't wish that to any other nation in the world. The price of losing foreign investment, the price of losing tourism, the price and cost of our talent and business entrepreneurs taking their families out of Mexico, and more of a cost than losing hope and faith to the future. I cannot imagine anything worse than that. So we have to find a way out, and we should do it as soon as possible. It's urgent that we find that way out. We have a partnership with Canada, United States, and Mexico through NAFTA. We are friends, and we are neighbors, and we have a joint responsibility on solving this problem. We're going to speak a little bit more about those issues now. But again, welcome, Prime Minister Chretien. You're in a way my inspiration. I was inspired by the way you reduce deficit, the way you reduce debt, and fortunately Mexico did exactly the same. And this is the message to this nation. You cannot live on the long term by having deficit in your economy. You need to start thinking about how much you should consume today and how much you should save to the future of this nation. And this example we see in Asia. They save money to build a future for next generations. They don't consume everything today, but they keep some of their resources and their revenues to have a brighter future. So that's a great question mark to this nation. And I end up here.
You know, for us, I said to the President and to Mr. Blair at that time, who were putting pressure on Canada and on Mexico, but Canada was a bit more complicated because we always been in a war with America and Great Britain at the same time. It was the first time we did not go with them. Our position was very clear. As I explained at that time, Canada always been involved with the United Nations. The first time that there was troop of the United Nations involved to bring peace was during the crisis of Suez, when, you know, the British and the French attacked Egypt over the control of the Canal of Suez. And that is the time when my predecessor, Mike Pearson, got the Nobel Prize for that. He engineered the peace and establishment of the first blue berets on the site. So our policy is always related to the United Nations. So we had said very early in the process to the President, I had said that myself in Detroit, if you have the UN, Canada will be there. But if you don't have the UN, we cannot be there. And to have the UN, you need a better proof that I've seen so far of a weapon of mass destruction. Because if you don't have a better proof of weapon of mass destruction, you won't have the UN. And it turned out that they didn't have a very good proof of that. I even wrote in my book that there was not enough proof to my knowledge that I could not convince the judge at the municipal court in Shawinigan that they had weapon of massive destruction. So we said no. Was it a good decision? It was very difficult for us because there was a lot of pressure on the President Fox and I to join what they call the willings. And, you know, it was very difficult because the business people were afraid. They said the Americans will retaliate against us. And I remember I said to a delegation of business people, some of them were calling my wife home to put pressure on me. That was very unfair. And, and that, you know, and I asked them, I said, give me the list of all the goods and all the services that the Americans are buying from us and they don't need. There was no list. So business is business. So we made the decision, but at that time the public opinion was half and half. Virtually all the newspapers were opposed to the decision that I made. Today, of course, you know, everybody thinks that we made the right decision, and I'm obliged to agree with them.
Give a brief comment here. I think at the very end, and profoundly, we were trying to support and help this nation. Going in direct interventions, going with a strategy of a unilateral actions and response will always get this nation into complications. Even though the objectives are very important, like fighting for democracy or getting rid of dictators or simply bringing peace to nations, should be the charter of the United Nations, not of each individual or single nation, because you're subject to mistakes. And if we created together the United Nations, we should support that institutions. We should make sure that they have the capacities to keep peace in this world, to bring solution to conflicts, to bring harmony to the relationship between nations. So much better than going and bypassing the United Nations, what we should do is to keep building a solid institution with great moral and ethical authority to carry on with the charter which we created the United Nations. I think that we should keep working on having that kind of global institution to the benefit of everybody.
And if I can add something, thank you, very good intervention. But we have, some people here in the United States, they're criticizing, it's not very popular to talk about United Nations. But if we look lately, in Libya, the United Nations said yes. Now, people would like the United Nations to intervene in Syria. But we're not there. Sometimes, there's all sort of problems for Russia, or China, or sometimes America to give consent to the United Nations. But generally speaking, when you go as a family of nations, it's much more credible than if you do it unilaterally. And for us, that has been the policy of Canada for a long time, since the Canal Suez, that we go with the United Nations.